pretty severe depression and also terrible internet habits, which is how I recently found myself falling down a YouTube hole of true crime videos. Basically, I attempt to work writing things while listening to a man in the background calmly describe a brutal murder, usually of a woman, usually by her husband or her lover or her male stalker. It's extremely not helpful, but you're not my therapist, so we're not gonna go into it right now. But of course, after falling into this YouTube hole, I was then hit by YouTube's fantastic algorithm. As you may know, if you go on YouTube and watch more than 5 videos on the same topic, then at some point you will inevitably encounter the stupidest, most pseudoscientific version of that topic recommended to you by YouTube. There it is, Watson's Law, let's say. The version of that for true crime I've discovered is body language experts. Because sure enough, channels like Derek Von Shake have started showing up in my recommendations list. Guys like Van Shake claim to have a superior level of understanding body language to be able to tell specifically when someone is lying and when they aren't. This sort of thing was intensely popular back in the early 2000s when Malcolm Gladwell wrote about the fascinating psychologist Paul Ekman. Ekman discovered the concept of micro-expressions, little facial tics that can tip you off as to someone's emotional state. So, for instance, Ekman cataloged basically every facial expression possible and then pointed out that Bill Clinton, for instance, used numbers 12, 15, 17, and 24 with an eye roll when he was lying about something. If you don't know about Ekman, you may know about the TV show he inspired called Lie to Me, in which Tim Roth plays this brilliant psychologist with a near magical ability to detect when people are lying based upon their micro-expressions. It was extremely dumb, but also I kind of loved it. Tim Roth, solving murders, what's not to love? That said, I don't love the spread of pseudoscience to a large population because, yeah, once it hits the police procedural level, pretty much any science turns into pseudoscience. But was it pseudoscience prior to that point? Honestly, it's kind of hard to say. Ekman himself has definitely made a very good case for most of his hypotheses, including his idea that, for instance, expression of emotion is universal across all human cultures. So, for instance, a smile is a sign of happiness, whether you're in San Francisco or Guangzhou or Tierra del Fuego. Someone smiles at you, you know they're happy. Micro-expressions as a sign of lying, though, one of his other hypotheses, is a bit trickier. Ekman himself points out how rare it is for anyone to be able to detect micro-expressions and ferret out liars with any degree of certainty. He says that the people he has trained can do it with 95% accuracy, and that's with Ekman himself directly, personally training them for years. And even then, the point isn't simply to detect a lie based on a random behavior, like itching your nose or looking to the left before answering a question. Ekman points out that, for the most part, all the things we think about what people do when they lie, those things are myths. And that training in micro-expressions is more about detecting when someone is trying to hide an emotion, like anger or fear, and then figuring out why they are trying to hide that emotion in this particular context. How many of Ekman's well-trained lie spotters go on to make popular YouTube videos about whether or not, let's say, an Instagram influencer is lying about the quality of her lipsticks? I'm going to hazard a guess that the number is 0. But these people are still out there, claiming to be able to spot lies. Derek Van Shake is the one who keeps popping up in my feed, so he's the one I looked into. Sure enough, he doesn't appear to have any proper training in micro-expressions or body language or psychology. The closest he comes is a minor in behavioral science in undergrad with a major in political science. Does that mean he's wrong? Absolutely not. Even Ekman points out that some people are naturals at spotting liars. But people like Van Shake claim to take a scientific look at the body language of complete strangers in order to determine whether or not they're lying. And that is immoral, extremely immoral. It would be like someone who took a few biology classes in college watching YouTube videos and diagnosing people with illnesses. Like, see the way his skin is slightly yellow? Clear sign of jaundice. You know, you wouldn't do that. So why would you call strangers liars and say that it's science? Well, I do have a guess on why you would do that. Because 1 million views on a video doesn't pay too bad. YouTubers like Van Shake seem to make most of their videos by simply watching videos of people who we already know are lying and then pointing out the body language that they think matches up with that lying. That's easy. What would be hard is watching videos of people who you don't know talking about things that aren't obviously lies and then picking out when they're lying. Let's see what happens when an untrained lie detector has a look at a video where he's not sure if the person in question is lying. In this case, it's Van Shake examining a video of Bob Lazar on Joe Rogan.
The top layer, I think that has to do with a navigation or their version of a computer.
Now, you said there's 9 of them, and you got a brief glimpse at the other ones. How are they different?
They looked completely different.
There are 9, and their shapes vary. I only got to do a close inspection on one of them. The others I just briefly saw, and they pretty much varied. I gave everything nicknames there. The one I worked on was kind of sleek looking, and I gave it the name the Sport model. I only entered the Sport model. The other ones I wasn't allowed to loiter around, to go near, really even to look at. I just, at one point, walking through the hangar doors, all the bay doors between all the hangars were open, and I got a glimpse all the way down, the whole corridor. But that was the only time it was ever open.
Some have argued that Bob's story has changed. Sure, some slight movement of sequence of events, or he mentioned something in one interview and didn't mention in another interview, or maybe estimate measurements have changed a bit. Yeah, I mean, it's not ideal for his cause, but that sometimes happens when we recall an event that happened decades ago. But Bob's overall story hasn't changed throughout the years.
I say Van Shake is not sure Lazar is lying in order to be kind, but let's drop that pretense. Lazar is absolutely lying because he's been a liar for 3 entire decades now, and Van Shake shares an audience and a certain energy with Joe Rogan, both being mediocre white men who think that they're smarter than they are. If you're not aware, Bob Lazar is a man who believes in aliens, and since 1989, he has claimed that he helped the military reverse engineer alien technology located near Area 51. He has never been employed by the Air Force. He never attended MIT or Caltech, as he claimed. And in 1990, he was arrested and pled guilty to involvement in a prostitution ring. He is a grade A kook. He's been lying for literally 30 years. And at this point, I'm sure he can do it with his eyes shut. And he probably even believes what he's saying. Anyone with any sense can look at this story and say without a shadow of a doubt that Lazar is obviously a liar. But Van Shake either has no sense or he's willing to suspend it because his gullible audience wants to believe that Lazar is truthful and that Joe Rogan is, of course, a genius who couldn't possibly be fooled by this obvious liar.
Sure, some slight movement of sequence of events, or he mentioned something in one interview and didn't mention in another interview.
And this is where we start to really see the harm of this particular pseudoscience of body language experts who have no actual training or ethics. On the one hand, you have the possibility of these idiots accusing innocent people of lying. On the other hand, you have assholes who are pretending to use science to prop up morons and scam artists. That's the ultimate irony here. Lying to an audience about your own supposed superhuman ability to detect lies in order to excuse other liars. It's like the inception of pseudoscience. And it's not just YouTubers who are doing this. As I was researching this video, I saw this tweet from U.S. prosecutor Joyce Aline, who writes, "As a prosecutor, I was taught that when a witness looks down and to the right as they answer, it's a signal they are not being truthful." And she includes a link to Mike Pence being interviewed about Ukraine. He's answering questions about his involvement with that. And sure enough, he does look down and to the right when he answers. But also that happens to be where his notes are, down and to the right. My friend, psychologist Richard Wiseman, actually studied whether or not your eyes can betray whether or not you're telling the truth way back in 2012. And he found that no, they don't at all. But here we are 7 years later, and someone who is responsible for identifying criminals and putting them in prison has just admitted to using pseudoscience to do her job. That is terrifying. Like, sure, it is ultimately up to a judge and jury in the end, but prosecutors have a huge amount of leverage to determine who they pursue charges against and what sentencing they recommend. So how do you actually tell when someone is lying? Honestly, the research tells us that you may as well just ignore their body language. Pay attention not to how they're saying something, but to what they're saying. Trained researchers may be able to detect lies based on, for instance, how many details a person includes in their story or what words they choose. But you, an untrained person, can also pay attention and get a hint that someone may be lying. Like, does their story make sense? Is it externally consistent? Like, does it violate the laws of physics, Lazar? Is it internally consistent? Like, does what they're saying now jibe with what they said last week? Or do they claim to be able to read body language to tell that someone who says he stole alien technology from Area 51 is telling the truth? Because, yeah, that's a classic sign that someone's lying.